The first sign of the aliens came on a quiet Tuesday morning. The sky above New York City shimmered faintly, like heat waves rising from asphalt. Within moments, a massive ship appeared, hovering silently over the Empire State Building. It was sleek and black, its surface reflecting the city below as if it were made of liquid glass. People stopped in their tracks, staring upward with a mix of awe and fear. Similar ships soon materialized over London, Tokyo, and other major cities around the world. Jacob Hayes stood on the rooftop of a small military outpost in Nevada, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He wasn't in New York, but he could see one of the ships clearly from where he was stationed. It loomed in the distance, enormous and unshakable, casting a shadow over the desert landscape. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from frustration. For days now, humanity had tried everything to communicate with the visitors, who called themselves the Vorthax. Radio signals, light patterns, even attempts at physical contact, all met with silence or, worse, laughter. "They're mocking us," Jacob muttered under his breath, lowering the binoculars. Behind him, Sergeant Laura Miller adjusted her rifle, her jaw tight with tension. "They haven't done anything aggressive yet," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe her own words. "Maybe they're just curious." Curious. Jacob turned to face her, his voice rising despite himself. "They've ignored every attempt we've made to talk to them. And when we fired warning shots, they laughed. Actually laughed." It was true. Earlier that week, Jacob's unit had fired several rounds at the underside of the nearest ship. The bullets ricocheted harmlessly off its impenetrable hull, and moments later, a strange sound filled the air, a deep, echoing chuckle transmitted directly into their minds. It wasn't threatening, exactly, but it carried an unmistakable condescension, as if the Vorthax found humanity amusingly primitive. Back at NASA headquarters, Emily Dawson sat hunched over her computer, headphones clamped tightly over her ears. She was part of a team trying to decode the Vorthax transmissions, which came in bursts of complex patterns and frequencies. So far, progress had been slow. The language, if it could even be called that, was unlike anything humans had encountered before. But Emily refused to give up. She replayed one particular sequence again and again, listening for any hint of structure or meaning. "They're not random," she told herself softly, jotting down notes on a legal pad beside her. "There has to be a pattern here." Her supervisor, Dr. Alan Carter, walked into the room just then, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one down next to Emily and leaned against her desk, watching her work. "Any breakthroughs?" he asked, sipping his drink. "Not yet," Emily admitted, rubbing her temples. "But I think I'm close. There's something almost musical about these sounds, like they're communicating through rhythm as much as words." Dr. Carter nodded thoughtfully. "Keep at it. If anyone can crack this code, it's you." Meanwhile, across the country, people were beginning to panic. News reports showed crowds gathering in streets, pointing at the skies and shouting questions no one could answer. Some claimed the aliens were gods. Others insisted they were invaders preparing to strike. Governments issued statements urging calm, but trust in authority was waning. Protests erupted outside military bases, demanding action against the mysterious visitors. Jacob watched clips of the protests on a small TV in the outpost's break room. He felt torn between anger and helplessness. As a soldier, he wanted to fight back, to protect his planet. But how could anyone fight an enemy that seemed untouchable? The Vorthax hadn't harmed anyone, not yet, but their presence alone was enough to destabilize the world. That night, Jacob climbed back onto the roof, gazing up at the stars. The alien ship still hung there, silent and unmoving. For a moment, he wondered what it would feel like to stand face to face with one of them. Would they look human, or would they be something entirely alien, beyond comprehension? Whatever they were, Jacob knew one thing for certain. Humanity couldn't stay passive forever. Days turned into weeks, and the presence of the Vorthax ships became a grim reality. The world had changed, but not in the way science fiction movies had predicted. There were no grand declarations of peace or offers of advanced technology. Instead, the aliens remained eerily silent, their ships hovering above cities like silent judges. People began to adjust to the new normal, though normal felt like a fragile illusion. Jacob Hayes found himself growing more restless with each passing day. He hated the feeling of helplessness that clung to him like a second skin. At the outpost, tensions ran high. Soldiers spent hours debating what the Vorthax wanted. Some believed they were waiting for humanity to make a mistake, while others thought they were merely observing, like scientists studying lab rats. Jacob didn't know which idea was worse. What he did know was that the constant laughter, the mocking, condescending chuckle transmitted whenever humans tried anything, was eating away at morale. It wasn't just his unit. Reports from other bases told the same story. Every missile fired, every signal sent, every attempt at communication ended the same way, with that infuriating laugh. Emily Dawson, on the other hand, was buried deep in her work. Her small office at NASA headquarters was cluttered with papers, empty coffee cups, and half-eaten snacks. She barely slept, driven by the belief that the key to understanding the Vorthax lay hidden in their transmissions. The rhythmic patterns she'd identified grew clearer with each analysis. They weren't random noises. They were deliberate, almost melodic. But what did they mean? And why did they seem to repeat certain sequences over and over? One evening, as Emily replayed a particularly complex transmission, something clicked. She noticed a recurring pattern embedded within the sounds, a series of rising and falling tones that resembled human laughter. At first, she thought it might be coincidence, but the more she listened, the more convinced she became. The Vorthax weren't just laughing at humanity's attempts to harm them. Their laughter was part of their communication, a way to convey emotion, or perhaps dominance. "This isn't mockery," Emily whispered to herself, scribbling furiously in her notebook. "It's psychological warfare." Her discovery caught the attention of General Harold Bennett, a gruff but sharp-minded man who led a top-secret task force formed to deal with the alien crisis. When Emily presented her findings during a video conference, the general leaned forward, his steely eyes fixed on her screen. "You're saying their laughter is intentional?" he asked, his voice low and measured. "Yes, sir," Emily replied, trying to mask her nervousness. "They're using it to undermine us, to make us feel powerless. It's not just about our weapons failing. It's about making us doubt ourselves." General Bennett nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "If that's true, then we need to shift our focus. We can't let them win this mind game." The next morning, Jacob received orders to report to a classified location. Along with a handful of other soldiers, he was flown to a remote military compound nestled deep in the mountains. There, he met Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, a no-nonsense officer with a reputation for getting results. Ryan wasted no time laying out the mission. They were forming a special operations team tasked with finding a way to strike back against the Vorthax, not directly, but strategically. "We've been playing defense long enough," Ryan said, pacing in front of the assembled group. "It's time to take the fight to them, but we can't do it alone." That's where Dr. Dawson comes in. Jacob glanced at Emily, who stood near the back of the room, clutching a folder filled with notes. She looked out of place among the soldiers, her face pale but determined. Despite her quiet demeanor, there was a fire in her eyes that Jacob couldn't ignore. Over the following days, the team worked tirelessly to piece together a plan. Emily shared her insights about the Vorthax's behavior, emphasizing the importance of targeting something they valued. "If we can find their weakness," she explained, "we might have a chance." But finding that weakness wouldn't be easy. The Vorthax seemed untouchable, their technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. Still, Jacob felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. Maybe, just maybe, They could turn the tables after all. The compound buzzed with activity as the team worked around the clock. Jacob Hayes quickly realized that this wasn't going to be a typical military operation. The soldiers weren't just training or strategizing. They were collaborating with scientists, engineers, and linguists. Emily Dawson became a central figure in the effort, her insights guiding much of the planning. She spent hours explaining her theories about the Vorthax's behavior, emphasizing that their laughter wasn't just mockery, but a sign of arrogance. If humanity could exploit that arrogance, she argued, they might stand a chance. Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell took charge of organizing the group, dividing tasks based on expertise. Jacob was assigned to assist a team of engineers led by Maria Lopez, a sharp-witted woman with grease-stained hands and a knack for problem-solving. Together, they pored over blueprints and sketches, trying to design a weapon capable of penetrating the Vorthax ship's impenetrable hulls. It was frustrating work. Every idea seemed to hit a dead end, and the pressure weighed heavily on everyone. "We're not just building something to fight back," Maria said one evening, rubbing her temples. "We're building hope. If this doesn't work, people will lose faith." Jacob nodded, though he didn't reply. He knew she was right. Back at the outpost, he'd seen how the constant presence of the alien ships had worn down his fellow soldiers. Morale was fragile, held together by sheer determination and the belief that humanity could still prevail. But if this new plan failed, it might shatter what little confidence remained. Meanwhile, Emily continued analyzing the Vorthax transmissions, searching for clues about their priorities. Late one night, while listening to a particularly dense sequence of sounds, she noticed something unusual. Buried within the patterns was a reference to an object called the Nexus. At first, she thought it might be a code name for their ships, but further analysis suggested otherwise. The Nexus appeared to be something separate, a structure orbiting the Vorthax home planet. From the context of the transmissions, it seemed to hold immense importance, possibly even serving as the source of their power. Excited by her discovery, Emily rushed to share the news with General Bennett and Lieutenant Mitchell. The general listened intently, his expression unreadable, while Ryan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "If the Nexus is as critical as you think," Ryan said slowly, "then hitting it could cripple them. But how do we even get close? Their defenses are insane." Emily hesitated before answering. "We don't need to destroy it completely, at least not yet. If we can damage it enough to disrupt their systems, it might buy us time. And more importantly, it'll show them we're not as weak as they think." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Attacking the Nexus would require traveling deep into enemy territory, a suicide mission by any standard. But it was also their best shot at turning the tide. Over the next few days, the team refined their strategy. Jacob worked closely with Maria and her crew to build a prototype weapon, codenamed Project Eclipse. It was unlike anything humanity had ever created, a device designed to emit a concentrated burst of energy capable of bypassing He Chi, Towen Zui Hu Ji Shai, Qing Gao Su Wo. The days blurred together as the team raced against time to complete Project Eclipse. Jacob Hayes spent long hours in the workshop, his hands calloused from handling tools and machinery. The prototype weapon was taking shape, but progress was slow and fraught with challenges. Maria Lopes often snapped at her team when parts didn't fit or circuits failed, but no one blamed her. The weight of their mission hung over everyone like a storm cloud. They all knew that failure wasn't an option. Jacob admired Maria's determination, even when frustration got the better of her. One evening, after yet another setback, she threw a wrench onto the workbench and sighed deeply. "We're running out of time," she muttered, rubbing her temples. "If we don't get this right soon, it won't matter how clever our plan is." "We'll figure it out," Jacob said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He picked up the wrench and handed it back to her. "Let's try again. Maybe we're overcomplicating things." Maria gave him a small, tired smile. "You might be right. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. With renewed focus, the team simplified the design of Project Eclipse, stripping away unnecessary components. Slowly but surely, the weapon began to take form. It wasn't sleek or polished. Far from it, but it had potential. When they finally powered it up for a test run, the machine hummed to life, emitting a faint blue glow. The room erupted in cheers, though tempered by the knowledge that real-world conditions would be far less forgiving. Meanwhile, Emily Dawson continued her work decoding the Vorthax transmissions. She spent most of her time in a cramped office filled with humming computers and stacks of notes. Her discovery of the Nexus had given the team a target, but she still needed to learn more about its vulnerabilities. Late one night, while replaying a transmission, she noticed something new, a series of tones that seemed to correspond to coordinates. Could these be the location of the Nexus? Emily cross-referenced the data with star charts and quickly realized the significance of what she'd found. The coordinates pointed to a region of space near the Vorthax home planet, heavily guarded by their fleet. It was a dangerous path, but not impossible to navigate if they timed their approach carefully. Heart pounding, she rushed to share the news with Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell. "This could be it," she said breathlessly, spreading her notes across the table. "If we follow these coordinates, we can find the Nexus, but we'll need to move fast and quietly." Ryan studied the information, his jaw tightening. "It's risky, but it's our only shot. I'll brief the general and start planning the mission." As the team prepared for the upcoming operation, tensions ran high. Soldiers trained tirelessly, simulating every possible scenario they might encounter. Jacob spent hours in flight simulators, practicing maneuvers to evade enemy ships. Though he was an experienced pilot, the thought of facing the Vorthax fleet made his stomach churn. Still, he pushed forward, drawing strength from the camaraderie of his teammates. One afternoon, during a rare break, Jacob found himself sitting beside Emily in the compound's cafeteria. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but there was a spark of determination in her gaze. "You've done incredible work," Jacob said, breaking the silence. "Without you, we wouldn't have a plan." Emily smiled faintly. "And without people like you willing to risk everything, my work wouldn't mean anything. We're in this together." Her words stayed with Jacob long after their conversation ended. For the first time since the aliens' arrival, he felt a glimmer of hope, not just for victory, but for humanity's resilience. Despite the fear and uncertainty, people were coming together, pooling their skills and courage to fight for a future worth living. As the final pieces of Project Eclipse fell into place, the team gathered for a briefing. Ryan stood at the front of the room, his expression grim but resolute. "This is it," he said, looking each person in the eye. "We've trained, we've planned, and now it's time to execute. No matter what happens out there, remember why we're doing this. Humanity is counting on us." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Jacob glanced around at the faces of his fellow soldiers, seeing the same mix of fear and resolve reflected in their eyes. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The night before the mission, Jacob Hayes couldn't sleep. He lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, replaying every possible scenario in his mind. What if something went wrong? What if Project Eclipse failed? The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, but he reminded himself why he had volunteered for this. Humanity was counting on them, and he wasn't about to let fear stop him. At dawn, the team gathered in the hangar where 3 small, sleek shuttles waited. Each one carried a crew of 4, along with mounted prototypes of Project Eclipse. The atmosphere was tense but focused. Soldiers double-checked their gear while engineers ran final diagnostics on the weapons. Emily Dawson moved between the teams, offering last-minute advice and encouragement. Her presence calmed some nerves, though Jacob could see the worry etched on her face. "Remember," she said to Jacob as he climbed into his shuttle, "timing is everything. Hit the Nexus at its weakest point, and don't hesitate." Jacob nodded, giving her a small smile. We'll get it done." As the engines roared to life, Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell's voice crackled over the comms. "All units, prepare for launch. This is it, people. Stay sharp and stick to the plan." The shuttles lifted off smoothly, disappearing into the sky within moments. From Earth, they looked like tiny specks against the vastness of space. Inside Jacob's cockpit, the hum of the engine filled the silence as the fleet sped toward the coordinates Emily had provided. The journey would take hours, during which the crew remained alert, scanning for any sign of trouble. When they reached the edge of Vorthax territory, the first wave of enemy drones appeared. Small and agile, they darted around the shuttles, firing beams of energy that lit up the darkness of space. Jacob's hands tightened on the controls as he executed evasive maneuvers, weaving through the chaos. His teammates worked together seamlessly, some firing countermeasures, others monitoring shields, but the tension inside the shuttle was palpable. "Keep it steady," Ryan's voice barked over the comms. "Stick to formation." Despite the odds, the team managed to hold their ground. One by one, the drones were neutralized, though not without cost. A nearby shuttle took heavy damage, forcing its pilot to break formation and retreat. Jacob clenched his jaw, watching the damaged craft disappear from view. They couldn't afford to lose anyone else. Finally, the Nexus came into sight, a colossal structure orbiting the Vorthax home planet. It pulsed with an eerie blue light, radiating power that seemed almost alive. Jacob felt a chill run down his spine as he gazed at it. This was what the aliens valued most, the heart of their empire. If they succeeded, humanity might stand a chance. "Target confirmed," Maria's voice broke through the comms. "Eclipse systems are online. Locking onto Nexus." The shuttles approached cautiously, dodging more drones and bursts of energy from larger ships guarding the structure. Just as they positioned themselves for the attack, alarms blared inside Jacob's cockpit. An enemy cruiser loomed ahead, blocking their path. "We can't let them stop us," Jacob shouted, pushing the throttle forward. With precision honed from weeks of training, he slipped past the cruiser, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. Behind him, another shuttle followed suit, covering his tail with suppressive fire. "All units, fire now," Ryan commanded. Jacob pressed the trigger, activating Project Eclipse. A brilliant beam of energy shot out, striking the Nexus dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive structure shuddered violently, sending shockwaves rippling across its surface. Lights flickered, and parts of the Nexus began to collapse inward. The Vorthax fleet reacted instantly, abandoning their passive stance and launching a full-scale assault. But it was too late. The damage had been done. As the shuttles turned to retreat, Jacob glanced back at the crumbling Nexus, a surge of hope rising in his chest. Against all odds, they had struck true. The retreat was anything but smooth. As the shuttles turned away from the damaged Nexus, the Vorthax fleet unleashed its full fury. Swarms of drones and larger ships gave chase, their weapons firing relentless beams of energy that lit up the darkness of space. Jacob Hayes gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white as he maneuvered his shuttle through the chaos. Explosions erupted around them, shaking the small craft violently. "Shields are down to 40%, shouted one of Jacob's crewmates from the seat behind him. "We can't take much more of this." "Hold on," Jacob yelled back, his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. He pushed the throttle forward, weaving between enemy fire with practiced skill. Every second felt like an eternity, the hum of the engines blending with the deafening roar of destruction outside. Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell's voice crackled over the comms. "All units, maintain formation. We're almost clear." But staying together was easier said than done. The Vorthax were relentless, their attacks growing more aggressive by the moment. One of the shuttles took a direct hit, spinning out of control before exploding in a blinding flash of light. Jacob flinched, his heart sinking as he realized the lives lost aboard that ship. There was no time to mourn. They had to keep moving. Back at Mission Control on Earth, Emily Dawson watched the live feed from the shuttle's cameras, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of her desk. The screen showed flashes of light and streaks of enemy fire, making it hard to tell what was happening. Static occasionally interrupted the transmission, adding to the tension in the room. "They're not going to make it," whispered Dr. Alan Carter, standing beside her. His voice was grim, reflecting the fear everyone felt. "They have to," Emily replied sharply, her eyes glued to the screen. "They've come too far to fail now." Her faith wasn't misplaced. Despite the overwhelming odds, the remaining shuttles fought back with everything they had. Maria Lopez's team coordinated their countermeasures perfectly, launching decoys and firing bursts of energy to distract the enemy. Slowly but surely, they began to create a gap between themselves and the pursuing Vortex. Inside Jacob's shuttle, the situation remained dire. Alarms blared as the shields dropped below 20%. Another hit could tear the craft apart. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a sudden explosion rocked the Vortex fleet behind them. One of their cruisers had been caught in the collapsing shockwave from the damaged Nexus, creating chaos among their ranks. "This is our chance," Ryan shouted over the comms. "Push forward. Don't look back." Jacob didn't need to be told twice. He poured every ounce of focus into navigating the shuttle toward safety, dodging debris and stray shots as the Vortex fleet scrambled to regroup. The other surviving shuttle followed closely, its crew working together to cover their escape. Finally, after what felt like hours, the shuttles broke free of the enemy's reach. The Vortex stopped pursuing, likely realizing the futility of chasing them further. For the first time since the battle began, Jacob allowed himself to breathe. "We did it," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. Exhaustion washed over him, but so did relief. They had struck the Nexus and lived to tell the tale. On Earth, cheers erupted in Mission Control as the first reports came in. Emily sank into her chair, tears streaming down her face. Against all odds, humanity had delivered a blow to the seemingly invincible Vortex. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was proof that they could fight back. As the shuttles descended toward Earth, Jacob looked out the window at the blue and green planet below. Despite everything, there was still beauty in the world, and people willing to risk everything to protect it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew humanity wouldn't give up without a fight. The shuttles touched down on Earth to a hero's welcome. Crowds had gathered near the landing site, waving flags and cheering as the battered crafts came into view. Jacob Hayes stepped out of his shuttle, squinting against the bright sunlight after hours in the darkness of space. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, but none of that mattered. The people saw him and his crew not as weary soldiers, but as symbols of hope, proof that humanity could stand up to the Vortex. Reporters shouted questions from behind barriers, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. Jacob ignored them, focusing instead on the faces in the crowd. Some were crying, others smiling through tears. He caught sight of a young boy holding a homemade sign that read asterisk, "Thank you for fighting asterisk." For a moment, Jacob felt overwhelmed. These were the people they had risked everything for, the reason they couldn't afford to lose. Emily Dawson arrived at the scene shortly after, escorted by General Bennett and Dr. Alan Carter. She looked exhausted but resolute, her eyes scanning the area until she found Jacob. Their gazes met briefly, and she gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. There was no need for words between them. They both understood what this moment meant. Inside the base, the team gathered for a debriefing. Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell stood at the front of the room, his expression serious despite the victory. "We hit the Nexus," he began, addressing the group. "But let's be clear, this isn't over. The Vortex may have retreated for now, but they won't stay quiet for long." Jacob nodded along with the others, knowing Ryan was right. Hitting the Nexus had been a major blow, but it wasn't destruction, it was disruption. The aliens still had resources, technology, and numbers far beyond humanity's reach. This battle had bought time, But the war was far from won. Emily stepped forward next, holding a tablet filled with data collected during the mission. The Nexus wasn't just a power source, she explained. It was central to their entire infrastructure. Without it, their fleet will be weaker, slower to respond. But we can't assume they're crippled forever. They'll adapt. And when they do, we need to be ready. Her words sent a ripple of unease through the room, but also determination. The team knew the stakes better than anyone. What they had accomplished was remarkable, but complacency would only lead to failure. Over the following days, the world began to process what had happened. News outlets broadcast footage of the damaged Nexus, analysts speculating about its significance. Governments issued statements praising the bravery of the mission's participants, while urging citizens to remain vigilant. Emily became an overnight celebrity, her theories about the Vorthax featured in interviews and articles worldwide. She handled the attention gracefully but remained focused on her work, determined to uncover more weaknesses in the alien defenses. For Jacob, life didn't return to normal so easily. Though hailed as a hero, he struggled with the memories of those lost during the mission. The explosion of the second shuttle haunted him, a reminder of the cost of their success. During quiet moments, he found himself thinking about the sacrifices made, not just by his crew, but by countless others who had fought before them. One evening, Jacob went for a walk outside the base, needing fresh air to clear his mind. He found Emily sitting on a bench overlooking the desert, staring up at the stars. She glanced at him as he approached but didn't say anything, letting him sit beside her in silence. "They'll come back," she said finally, breaking the quiet. "Stronger, angrier. We've shown them we can fight, but that might make them even more dangerous." "I know," Jacob replied softly, "but we've also shown ourselves something. Humanity isn't powerless. If we keep finding ways to adapt, to innovate, maybe we can win." Emily smiled faintly, turning her gaze back to the sky. "I hope you're right." As they sat there together, watching the vast expanse above, both knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, a brief pause before the storm returned. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they faced them united, armed with resilience and hope. In the weeks that followed, Earth began to rebuild. The victory against the Nexus gave humanity a much-needed boost of confidence. Factories ramped up production of advanced weapons and defensive systems, inspired by the technology used in Project Eclipse. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to improve upon the prototype, hoping to create something even more powerful for future battles. Emily Dawson led the effort, her mind constantly racing with ideas. She knew the Vorthax would return, and when they did, humanity had to be ready. Jacob Hayes tried to adjust to life after the mission, but it wasn't easy. He attended ceremonies honoring the fallen, accepting medals on behalf of his team, though he felt unworthy of praise. The faces of those who hadn't made it home haunted him, soldiers who had given everything so others could live. At night, he often dreamed of the battle, waking in a cold sweat as the sounds of explosions echoed in his ears. Still, he pushed forward, knowing that dwelling on the past wouldn't change anything. What mattered was preparing for the future. General Bennett called a meeting with key members of the task force, including Jacob, Emily, and Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell. The room was tense as Bennett laid out the reality of their situation. "The Vorthax are regrouping," he said, his voice firm. "Their silence isn't peace, it's preparation. We need to act now, not wait for them to strike first." Emily nodded, pulling up data on a large screen. "I've been analyzing patterns from their remaining transmissions. They're focusing on repairing the Nexus, but it'll take time. If we can disrupt their efforts again, or find another vulnerability, we might stand a chance." Ryan spoke next, outlining plans for a new initiative. "We're forming specialized units across the globe, trained to respond quickly to any threat. Pilots like Jacob will lead these teams, using upgraded versions of Project Eclipse. It's risky, but it's our best shot at staying ahead." The group agreed to move forward, each person taking on a critical role. Jacob returned to training, pushing himself harder than ever before. He worked closely with new recruits, teaching them the skills he'd learned during the mission. Though the responsibility weighed heavily on him, he found purpose in passing on his knowledge. These young men and women were humanity's next line of defense, and he refused to let them down. Emily, meanwhile, continued her research, diving deeper into the Vorthax language and behavior. She discovered subtle clues suggesting that the aliens viewed the Nexus not just as a tool, but as a symbol of their dominance. Damaging it had struck at the core of their identity, a psychological blow as much as a physical one. This insight gave her hope. If humanity could exploit the Vorthax's pride, they might gain the upper hand. As months passed, the world slowly began to heal. Cities once overshadowed by alien ships now buzzed with renewed energy. People rebuilt homes, reopened businesses, and celebrated small victories. Yet beneath the surface, tensions lingered. Everyone knew the calm wouldn't last forever. One evening, Jacob joined Emily on the same bench where they'd sat weeks earlier. The stars above seemed brighter tonight, untouched by the chaos below. Emily broke the silence first. "Do you think we'll see them again?" "I don't think," Jacob replied. "I know, but when they come, we'll be ready." She smiled softly, leaning back to gaze at the sky. "You're right. We've proven we can fight. That's something no one can take away from us." They sat there for a while longer, lost in thought. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges neither of them could predict. But amidst the fear and doubt, there was also hope, a quiet determination to keep moving forward, no matter what. For Jacob and Emily, and for everyone else, the battle had changed them. It had shown them the strength of human ingenuity, resilience, and unity. Though the Vorthax loomed as a constant threat, humanity had discovered something far greater: the courage to face the unknown, together. Whatever came next, they would meet it head-on, armed with the unshakable belief that even in the darkest moments, light could still prevail.